and welcome to ProCon 2021 and our enrichment elective session, Giving Voice to Our Values, How Executive Leadership Teams Make Change Happen. My name is Kathy Pomer, and I'm the director of the Sheva Center at JCC Association of North America. My preferred pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am coming to you from Londonderry, New Hampshire, where I acknowledge and have gratitude for the traditional stewards of this land, the Pawtucket, the Pennacook, Abenaki, and Wabanaki tribes. I am wearing bright red, and my hair is brown due to the wonders of chemistry. And as always, I have red lipstick, and today, red glasses too. Today, I am honored to be joined by my colleague and assistant director at the Sheva Center, Mackenzie Adams, in bringing you this incredibly wonderful opportunity live from the JCC of Greater Pittsburgh. At JCC Association, in all settings, even virtual, we want you to feel at home here and very much a part of the community, to join and participate, to add your voice and bring your strength to our community. We see this gathering and every time together through the lens of Tselem Elohim, divine image, and we are so honored that you are choosing to share your light, your ideas, and your strength with us. At this point, Mackenzie will put our JCC Association inclusion statement in the chat, and we ask that you let us know how we can help you truly feel a sense of belonging here. This session is being recorded. We understand that some people do not wish to be recorded, in which case you may turn off your camera, though we encourage everyone who's comfortable to stay visible so we can at least feel like we're all together. Should you have questions or needs of any kind during this session or others, please see how Mackenzie and I appear at the top of your participant list. Find us if we can help in any way at all. We aspire for every person to feel they belong at ProCon 21 and as part of our community. We are working to build inclusive spaces in which all people feel welcome, respected, safe, and fully included. And to that end, we encourage you to consider the following suggestions as we begin our time together. We invite you to rename yourself in Zoom with your name, agency, and adding your preferred personal pronouns. And we have closed captioning available to all at the bottom of your screen. If you'd rather remove it, please click to remove using the button on the bottom toolbar. We are thrilled to offer this conference at no cost to our JCCs, which was made possible because of our very generous ProCon 21 sponsors. Each sponsor believes in the JCC movement and the incredible work JCCs accomplish day in and day out. Their representatives are proud to be with us to share their expertise and offerings. We hope you'll join us in showing your appreciation for their support by visiting their booths in our virtual vendor hall. We also encourage you to connect with them anytime during ProCon 21 and beyond. During the conference, you can use the chat feature to connect with them. And after the conference, reach out using their contact information as listed on SpotMe. And now, the main event. At the Sheva Center, we are always on the lookout for people and agencies who are committed to putting their values forward and being accountable to them. We just know it's not only good business, it's the only way we will move forward, ready to create communities who care about what's most important. In Pittsburgh, in all areas, the JCC has been the leader to show us that in good times and really hard times, they are willing to make those tough decisions. The one where the hardest road to take is holding yourself accountable to what you know is most important. One of the secrets to their success is a leadership team that truly understands the merits of every voice being heard and responded to. We're lucky enough to hear from those leaders today, giving us some insights into that strength. Please use their wisdom and experience to see how this model of communication and collaboration could work for you. When we at the Sheva Center first heard about some of the brave decisions this team was making during the pandemic, we created a video series where leadership teams from many JCCs came together on film, taped for all to see what they were doing to show integrity and stay accountable. We hope you've seen this in our early childhood brief and the Sheva Center connections that we send out to you and JCC leadership. Each and every one of these teams and initiatives gives me such faith that each of us is emerging from this year with our compass pointed in exactly the right direction. We invite you today to think about how you can be giving voice to your values, sharing what you learn and bringing it back to your teams. That will be the true measure of today's success. Please check on the SpotMe platform for detailed bios, because I could go on and on about the three folks you're about to meet, but I will just say that having these incredible thought leaders, generous and brilliant, humble and humorous, transparent and never afraid to do the right thing, they are my teachers and friends. And right now, I am pleased to present President and Chief Executive Officer Brian Schreiber, Chief Program Officer Jason Kunzman, and Director of Early Childhood Development Center at the JCC of Greater Pittsburgh, Liza Barron, all from Greater Pittsburgh. Welcome to this incredible team. Take it away.
Thank you, Kathy. You certainly created high expectations. This is a great group. I'm looking around the screens, and I think we have a lot of the Sheva Center fellows, but we also have fellow executives, senior level professionals inside JC's early childhood directors, camp professionals. So we're going to try, while we're talking, early childhood, it is about teams, it is about leadership. So we're going to try to make it as generic as possible. Use the chat. Kathy is going to moderate that. We want to save a lot of time for Q&A, and we'll be as candid as possible. That's sort of the way we go around here. So it's really a pleasure, just a pleasure to be together in the whole conference. It is exciting. And I'm sure for all of the JCs that are part of this, I can feel the buzz inside our Greater Pittsburgh JCC, and people talking about sessions and trading notes and emails. And you really do get caught in this vibe. And it was just been a lot of fun, and it's exciting to be all together, and can't wait to do that in person. With that, let me start with my first question to Liza Barron, who I've known a long time in lots of different capacities and has been on our staff for a number of years and in different capacities, but moved into the early childhood role from our youth, family, and day camp division in 2014 or 2015. I can't quite remember the years. So Liza, as you moved and transitioned from sort of a camping youth role into early childhood, what were your top priorities in accepting this job, and why? And why did you take it?
It was 2015 at the very beginning. I think a top priority for me really early on was, one of them was to be transparent, to talk about what I didn't know, as much as I was talking about what I did know, because I was moving into an area that was going to be stepping a little bit outside of my comfort zone. My background is in social work and in camping. So I had a lot to learn about early childhood, and it became important over time for me to be honest about what I wanted and needed to learn and what I needed to grow. And about what we needed, who we needed sitting at the table, having the conversations with us and helping us to make decisions to support the forward movement of early childhood. Another priority was, of course, relationship building and thinking about the children, the families, the educators, the other supports of the JCC that we would need as well. Something that was really important to me was elevating the profession. That's really been a priority for me from day one. It only grows every other day that I come to work and thinking about how to do that. And when I came to early childhood, less than half of our full-time educators were fully benefited with health benefits. And the wages were kind of all over the place also. There wasn't any evident rhyme or reason to how decisions had been made about that. And so it was clear that we would need to develop a strategy to address that. And while looking at that and thinking about equity for educators and elevating the profession overall, it was clear there would need to be a strategy around building a leadership team. So an obvious leadership team, not just having a director in our school, having an assistant director and more, but also about thinking about being really intentional about second tier leadership, because it was clear that there were so many educators who had so much to offer, and skills and talents in some cases were being tapped into, but in many weren't. And it was so evident that we needed to look at what was already here and who was already doing what and who was going to help to sort of take it to that next place. I think one last priority for me at the time was thinking about the Reggio Emilia approach and really diving into understanding the approach that we were using, or the approach that we were saying that we were using, and understanding how it was introduced in the first place, understanding how the decisions were made to bring the approach and to bring the kinds of professional development that had been here and the renovation that happened. How did those things all come to be, so that I could understand the perspectives of the educators who we were asking to implement all of these things? There was an air of resistance, I think, for a lot of people. And once I really felt that, I needed to understand why that was the case. And I think that it came from a slightly, just a choppy introduction to how we were going to use that approach here. So those are the things that were really important to me really early on.
Liza, let me segue, because it will lead into your question. Early into your tenure in this new position comes the retirement of a long tenured employee of the JCC and a new senior manager that you were reporting to. So why don't I have you use that as sort of a piece also around professional development and transition?
Sure. When I came into early childhood, my supervisor at the time had been here for 1,000 years. And so had 1,000 years worth of things to offer.
Only 50.
Only 50. That was an exaggeration. And many important things and lessons over the years that I'd worked with her previously. But not long after I came into early childhood, Rachel left and Jason joined us. And so it was right from the start, it was clear that there was going to be a different kind of a partnership than I had experienced before, and a way more involved and intentional approach to problem solving. And that's Jason Kunzman is the person that came. And so the next question is for Jason. When you joined us at the JCC, what were some of the things that you wanted to learn about right away in early childhood, and what, if anything, really stood out to you?
Yeah. First, let me comment on replacing a modern legend, community legend. That's no small feat. As you mentioned, Liza, Rachel Marcus had been here for 50 years and had obviously left quite a legacy. So I think, that brought me here with a sense of humbleness and vulnerability. And me, I love hashtags. So I think that my motto was hashtag acknowledge that I did not know what I did not know. So early on, as you recall, we were in the midst of a local cohort learning experience with colleagues from other Jewish early learning centers, where the main focus of that effort was to basically increase the number of Jewish children in the collective set of early learning centers. And I think I took exception to that because in order to be able to attract Jewish families and Jewish children, you really need to be able to attract a broader audience as well. So what I really wanted to dig into was around our greatest challenges. And you touched upon a number of those in reference to the areas that you wanted to focus on when you first started in 2015, but also, and perhaps more importantly, what were the drivers of success? How would we know that we were winning beyond just the number of students that we had within our care? I also, the JCC of Greater Pittsburgh is a JCC that has two branches, one located here in the city, our Squirrel Hill branch, and another out in the suburbs in the South Hills, about 12 miles to our south. I wanted to get a better understanding of sort of what were the differences between the two marketplaces, expectations of both families as well as educators, and quite honestly, how we could sort of bridge that gap, if you will, and adopt a more of a paradigm that is, what we've sort of adopted here: one school, two locations. What were the key components that we needed to focus on in order to bring the two locations together philosophically, And again, Kathy, as we were prepping for this conversation, you mentioned how fun it was to see our gathering as we prepared for ProCon 2021. That was in our South Hills branch. And I got to tell you, the vast majority of folks that were there were from our South Hills early childhood staff. And man, we've really come a long way, and I couldn't be happier about that. So Brian, as I recollect, because you brought it up, about that transition from Rachel and replacing a community legend here, a lot of what I learned from her in my transition was around the importance of early childhood to the mission of the JCC, but also related to our financial success. How critical in your mind, and sort of has this changed through the years, is early childhood to the JCC, both from the financial as well as the mission aspect of things?
Thanks, Jason. I'll try to spice it up a little bit. So when I first came in as the CEO in 1999 and came to an executive conference, I was schooled by fellow execs saying, you got to make early childhood, fill it up. It's your cash cow. Never quite sat well with me. And that it sort of created this dichotomy that there are these cash cows and then there's your mission. The bottom line is that early childhood is core to our mission. And like every other program at the JCC, you have to make ends meet and you have to integrate those two. And I think that there was this sense of, filling every space you can and don't worry about ratios and, you'll make it work and et cetera, et cetera. And I think that was, early on, I was a little bit, as I tried to get my sea legs and what JCC life was about, sort of coming in with some preconceived notions of what that meant, and that there were programs that can never make money and programs that are going to have to just carry the day. And that has some degree of truthfulness, but relative. And over the years of practice is the understanding that you need to build a quality program. You need to keep your stakeholders engaged. Those are your families, those are your young children. And I think we all know that early childhood is the gateway and the beginning of Jewish life for lots of different families in lots of different ways. And then if you don't build quality, no one's going to come. Jewish community is not going to come. Other folks aren't going to come. Families of different environments that you're trying to attract won't come. And I think it's very easy to lose sight of that in what I would call core profitability. And by the way, we benchmark on that, right? We benchmark on core profitability. If you're not as profitable as other centers, what does that look like, et cetera, et cetera. And you wind up getting, somewhat influenced by it. And I think at the end of the day, as time went on, as Rachel retired, as you came on, Jason, as Liza began to build her practice, was the integration of how do you make all three areas work? That you can have mission, that you can have margin, that you have to integrate those two, that you have to support your workforce, and you have to maintain a long view. And that's not school year by school year and classroom by classroom, but that's about a bona fide philosophy. And the transitions from that into camping and the transitions of how you keep families engaged over the long term. So I think that was a piece that has evolved in my practice as an executive over time. And you will not hear me at an executive conference talk about anything we do as a cash cow. It's all in the furtherance of mission, or we shouldn't be doing it. Let me ask you those questions for both of you. You can both answer. What do you think the biggest challenge has been over the last 3 years as we've tried to integrate that work and try to grow and develop over time and integrate that? And frankly, you both have been very, very helpful in helping us understand what kind of investments you needed from the agency to be able to do that job and that mission at hand.
Liza, you want to kick off?
Yeah, are you asking about changes or challenges?
Challenges.
Okay.
And challenges and changes.
Okay. So I think going back to a little bit about what I was talking about before with equity among educators and elevating the profession, that one of the biggest changes, while I think that it's always been a priority here, I think we've been able to be a lot more intentional about it in the last few years. And so creating a strategy that would not only provide more professional development opportunities for educators, but would really provide them with the opportunity to become part of a second-tier leadership group and a leadership group in early childhood, and that's across both locations. When I came, there was the director position, and that was it. And we knew that we needed to have an assistant director here. We knew we needed to have somebody whose strengths would be different than mine, and who would help to ensure that educators' voices were a really big part of all of the decisions that we were making. We knew that we wanted to look internally also at as I was saying before, at the existing leaders, even if it wasn't part of their actual roles at the time. And so I think one of the biggest changes is that we were able to build that team. And we moved from having only a director here to having a director and an assistant director. And then ultimately also that included 3 education program coordinators and a studio educator. Things are a little bit different right now because of the pandemic and different decisions that we've made since we've returned last year. Our current associate director was our assistant director, and so she now leads our program in the South Hills, and she's on here somewhere, Gina Crow, and our assistant director, Kelly Gamina. And so growing that team and investing in that team has been a really, really big, important change. And that whole group has been able to be a part of ensuring the way that we think about the equity among our educators. And I'll wait to get to a little bit more about that piece. But I think that another change, but that I would also call a challenge, has been thinking about quality and deciding what the definition of quality is. It's a change that we're thinking about it. It's a challenge because I think the more we dive into it, the more we find out that there just isn't a universal answer. There's not a universal definition. I mean, we have a lot of ideas about it. And we're lucky we're engaged in so many conversations about it as well, locally and nationally. But I think that a huge challenge is in there not being a well-defined, a way to look at quality across the board, no matter what school you're looking at. So those are a couple things so far. Jason, you want to talk about a couple more?
Yeah, as a recovering healthcare policy wonk, quality rings loudly and truly to me. And I just want to reiterate, Liza, your point around having a lack of clear definition of quality in early learning. It's kind of funny. I think we know what it isn't, but we still haven't quite defined what it is. It doesn't have to just be, or does it have to be at all, being able to count to 100 by the time you enter kindergarten? Does it have to be that your ABCs forwards and backwards? I would argue no, not at all. But perhaps instead having children who understand and appreciate how to solve a problem amongst one another. Again, I don't know how you measure such a thing, but that's the direction I think that we really need to move in. As Brian said, early childhood is at the core of our mission. And if we're in the business of, raising our youngest citizens to be active participants in our communities, things like inspiring them to problem solve in creative and collaborative ways certainly rings true to me in terms of a definition of quality. I'd also say a big change, certainly since my arrival, again, harkening back to my healthcare days, is the way that we approach what probably most people would refer to as problems. Step one is to redefine those quote unquote problems as opportunities for improvement. Sort of takes that air of defensiveness, if you will, out of the practice of addressing those types of issues. and really creating a safe environment where you can be vulnerable and totally transparent as we in early childhood are working our ways through a multitude of opportunities for improvement. And I want to be clear, although Kathy, you in your introduction made us all blush, us at the JCC in general, as well as our early childhood center, we have no more or less opportunities for improvement than any other early childhood center. But I'd like to think that our approach is somewhat unique, and it also includes a systematic approach to addressing those opportunities for improvement. Not just Liza and the leadership team pontificating on what they believe that the answer or intervention might be, but engaging folks across the early childhood learning center to talk about those opportunities and to weigh in and to test. Here's our first hypothesis. Let's go with it. Let's see if things get better. If not, let's re-engage and take it iteratively. One other thing, and Brian, you touched upon it, a big change. When I started here 4.5 years ago, early childhood ran at a divisional profit of around 22.5%. Pre-COVID, we were down to, I want to say 18.6%, if memory serves me correctly. And from an agency perspective, that's quite a hit. But our commitment to quality, to providing Liza and the team with the resources needed, both in terms of human resources as well as day-to-day resources, program supplies and the like. It costs money, and if we are to remain true to the fact that early childhood is at the center of our mission, that comes at a cost. So I think that somewhat of a shift in that thinking has occurred. And the last thing that I would bring up, Liza, I don't know if you want to expand on it at all, and this is a yet to come change, but we're working on it in time for our upcoming evaluation process, is that we as an agency have a formal performance review process. And Liza and the team have been saying for a bit now that it doesn't exactly fit the early childhood environment. So we are working pretty hard to reimagine what that evaluation process can look like, what the questions, what the objectives, how they're framed, and even the timing. We may have a timing for that process specific for early childhood, and then timing for the rest of the agency. Again, if we're all about elevating the profession, then evaluation is a key opportunity for leadership and the team to get onto the same sheet of music as to what the expectations are, not just for individual professionals, but for the entire early learning center. And if we can customize and make that process better, I think we'll definitely reap some positive benefit there.
Kathy, we'll get into the pay issues. I see the chat starting
Sorry,
to.
I just didn't know. Great.
We will cover some of the pay issues. The comment I'll make is it's very important to put compensation in the context of the overall management philosophy, because you can't just solve things through pay. You have to solve them holistically. And then if you do all the management in the world, but you don't think about compensation, you're not going to solve it either. So that's going to be the short answer. We'll get to a longer answer later.
I want to add to that. I think that our efforts around JCC wide engagement with other departments has been really important. So Jason, when you were talking about evaluations, performance reviews, and thinking how to make them early childhood specific, I think that's so important because every department is different. Every the section of the workforce in your department is going to be different, and the goals are going to be different. But we've really looked at that closely and have thought a lot about how to involve Kathy Palmer's favorite thing, the Sheva lenses, into everything that we do, but into how we're evaluating and how we're setting goals for people. And I think that our efforts around connecting with other departments have helped to bridge a lot of that so much. We're all working in a really different time right now with COVID. And one of the best parts about this horrible time has been the connections that I think our department has worked really hard to build with other departments. And I think that the other departments have have worked just as hard to build those connections with a group of us who are, for anybody who's working in early childhood, we're in our own bubble so much of the time. And I think that we're seeing such a positive impact on our journey because of it. And when I think about where we are today, and the operations, the day-to-day things that are needed, not just the regular cleaning and shuffling kids around, but the screenings that we do now outside before anybody comes in each day. The coverages for teachers, not all of our educators came back when we reopened. We've really relied on so many other people at the JCC. So Brian and Jason and their team, you can see them every day doing the screenings for the early childhood families, and they get the panicked text or call from me when we're going to need some more help with bathroom breaks or something like that. And so there are so many people that are really happy to jump in. And I know that at our respective JCCs, we're met with a variety of different dilemmas every day. And I think that if you're operating in isolation or, without more stakeholders, without more interest and commitment from other people that you're working with at the JCC, it is so much harder to do the work that we do. And I imagine that that applies to any department when you're not as connected to some of the other, brilliant resources you have at your centers. So I think that's a really big change that I think was already in the making, but really sort of feels spotlighted this year, especially.
So Liza, I'm gonna cut to the chase a little bit, not just in terms of our changing compensation structure, but I think the opportunity that COVID presented. There are a lot of challenges that COVID presented, but there were a couple, I think, of opportunities, and I want to make sure we do have some time for the questions and things like that, and an opportunity to move the session along. I think a few things. One is just historically, and I think many JCs see this, no matter how hard you work. Liza talked about the fact that less than half the staff were benefited. Everybody we got benefited. That was a very quick and easy change. We tried to professionalize this. We tried to, again, build leadership tiers and the beginning of career pathing for certain educators that we wouldn't lose folks. So we built that over the years to do better. But we still always saw endemic challenges between the connectivity of our early childhood professionals with the rest of our staff. We'd see that in benchmarking. We moved from benchmarking to leading edge. We saw that in the leading edge surveys. I always found that difficult. And if you can recall, for those of you that run early childhood programs, the licensing, the regulations, and every state's different, but Pennsylvania is very rigorous, has made it very difficult. We're at the stage now where our teachers aren't even allowed to leave the building during their breaks because of fire code and all kinds of stuff. So can't even use the workout facilities. We saw negative changes when you're trying to do more for your staff. So no matter how hard we tried, it seemed like we weren't getting there. COVID provided a few opportunities for us. One is we knew that early childhood would be coming back first. We knew it would come back before fitness, and in fact, it did. We knew that in the first week or two. It was just a bet that we made. We also knew that people would be afraid. We knew we had to get folks back. And while we did a significant furlough, like many JCCs, I was very influenced by San Francisco. That was very clear that all their lead educators were not furloughed in every classroom. They knew they were rebuilding. And we sort of followed a similar philosophy to make sure that we had a core workforce when we came back. And then very quickly after PPP brought everybody back, even when they weren't really working at that point. So that was a commitment. But secondly, we made the commitment with these health screenings and pieces like that our senior team, including our CEO and Jason and others, would be right there on those screening lines from day one and forevermore, to be part of that team that was welcoming parents back. And in my mind, role modeling. There was not one task that we were going to ask an early childhood professional to do that we wouldn't be doing, and in a sustained way. And at least for me, besides the fact that it was incredible, even after 22 years as the CEO, it was incredibly uplifting to be part of that process and to be closer and more connected to our staff in a very deeper way, and our families as well. The other thing that I think you get sensitized to, particularly with these pods, and you can't have floaters and things like that, particularly at the beginning, as you're building your sea legs for what it's going to be look like, is things that we take for granted. Like anytime I need to take a bio break, I can go. I can't do that in early childhood if I go out of ratio and if we're serious about staying in ratio. So even the most simple things of life are difficult in early childhood that the rest of the workforce doesn't appreciate. Jason and I both licensed childcare professionals now by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, so that we can do these breaks and so that we can still stay in ratio. And I think that was also very, very tangible. But I think it brought us closer into the world of our early childhood professionals. And even though we had frozen salaries in the agency and looked at pieces, and even though we sort of, were hanging on our laurels that we were about 20 to 25% higher than the Pennsylvania market for childcare pay, and that everybody was benefited and only 20% of childcare professionals were benefited, we still keep losing staff to Whole Foods and Amazon and Target and everywhere else for a couple bucks an hour. We made a decision, I'll just get to the chase. We just made a decision, even at a point where the agency was losing hundreds of thousands of dollars, that we were just going to change the scale. We had a scale, but we were going to actually upgrade this scale to make sure the majority of our staff, and that there was a full path to get there, were making a living wage by anybody's definition. And that's going to cost us, at full employment, somewhere in the neighborhood of $280,000 to $300,000 more a year than we're already paying, but we're prepared to pay it. It was something that our board unanimously approved. And by the way, it was my call as the CEO. They don't really, there's a compensation committee that deals with highly compensated employees, but not childcare, but I wanted their blessing. We 100% got their blessing, both as an equity issue, but also as an ability to attract and retain workforce in a different way. We'll see how that plays out, as we know in every profession, teaching, bus drivers, truck drivers, you name it. There's not enough people who want to go in the employment market for any position right now. So I don't think we're going to know the full effect of that later. What I know is that I feel like we are now 40% above the childcare market. That for those that want to be in that profession, that they can do as well at the JC as they can in a lot of other places and find a lot more meaning in their work. We did attract one person that did leave to go to Amazon that came back here because he hated his job. And, and that, $2,500, $3,000 a year was a difference for him to be able to make ends meet. How long that career will be here, I don't know, but he's back, and hopefully we'll get others back as we see that labor market. But I know that we will figure that out. There is a flip side. And I think a lot of us see this in JCCs, which is, God forbid, if we charge more than 3% more than we did the prior year, the parents are going to go nuts. They won't take it. They won't accept it. They won't X, Y, and Z. There is a trade-off. So some of you said, how are you going to sustain this? So we're charging 5% more or 6%, whatever that number might be, because if you want quality and if you want continuity of care and you want your teachers to make a living wage, and we have a very liberal, progressive, early childhood market that believe in all of these things, you also have to pay for that value system. Now, maybe when Biden's proposal that I know is being articulated with universal child care, that will help a bit. But right now it's a private pay market with some supports. So it means that we're going to live our values, and our customer base is going to have to live those values as well. And if we're going to have that quality, we still are going to continue to scholarship those that can't afford it. But it also means that those that can afford it are going to have to pay more than we've traditionally charged to get there. And we'll see how those market forces come to play. But I'm going to go right back to mission at the last piece. If we start as a JCC with our youngest citizens, and we want to build that through our JCC system, this is where we have to start. It's not about a cash cow. It's about doing the best job we can with quality. It's about having the most engaged and quality workforce we can. It's about growing and building leadership. And it's about that very, very complex dynamic of mission and margin, as like any other program at the JCC. And I feel like I've been a bit schooled in this, a little more than 20 years into this job. And I just wanted to cut to the chase because I think it is important, and that early childhood shouldn't be different than what we're holding any other department in this agency accountable to. Not any less, and unfortunately, and not more to carry that burden off a workforce that oftentimes feel burdened and pressured and undervalued. I guess that's the showstopper, right, Kathy?
I think the mic just dropped. I heard it. Did everybody hear it out there? Thank you. Thank you.
And it's
so much.
recorded. I can't take it back now.
No, I know that's my favorite part. I love catching everything on film. Anyway, this is really, really important. I know that you all are, and we appreciate showing the real answers here. And I know there are some real questions in the chat here. I don't know. I'm happy to read out in the lineup. We've got Victoria from Salt Lake City. Hello. How did you cover that additional cost as an agency?
I'll have, I mean, Jason and Liza could add, but I ultimately made the decision. Right now we're losing so much money that we just said, what's another couple $100,000 more? Obviously we annualized it. We did it January 1, our fiscal year started in September. We're not fully staffed yet. I mean, so we're not going to see the full impact of that right now. It's going to be next year as we build the budget that we have to see where that's going to take. We do have one foundation that really provided some philanthropic backstop for us that I think will help bring us some cover as a full agency. Frankly, our membership problems are much greater than the early childhood raise in terms of where we're gonna go. And look, I don't think we're gonna be what we would call fully operational. I mean, we're not gonna have the same number of kids or the same number of rooms going into that fall of 21 than we had prior to the pandemic, just, for some additional safety and precautions and making sure that we're well staffed and all those other pieces. And look, we know kids aren't going to be vaccinated even in the fall. We have to look at this as a long-term proposition. We have to look at this as how we differentiate ourselves from the marketplace, both from a customer standpoint as well as a staffing perspective. So it isn't a one-shot piece that's not all going to work out the first year.
Hey, Kathy, if I could just add through an invitation to Liza, part of this, as Brian articulated, is a recruitment and retention strategy around staff. But it doesn't just begin and end with compensation. As Brian said, it is about building a culture of continuous learning and adapting and improvement. Liza, maybe you could throw out a few other sort of wraparounds that we've been able to incorporate to further build out that culture.
Yeah, I think that again, obviously the salaries are critical and really, really important, but if you're not investing in the experiences that educators have every day, it won't go as far. And I think we know that, even though I said before there's not a universal definition, I'm going to say that we know that high quality certainly has to include committed and engaged educators who are themselves lifelong learners. And if we aren't the ones offering those opportunities to them, how are they going to get them? And of course, people can seek that on their own. But if you work 9 hours a day with 2-year-olds, you might not do that. And so I want us to be the place that provides those opportunities. And so I'm talking about, I'm not just talking about, in-service opportunities, but conferences and beyond, and including teachers' voices in decisions that impact the entire school. And in addition to that,
and the entire agency for that matter, Liza.
And the agency.
Like our anti-racism work.
Yes. I think also we talk a lot lately. I mean, I think people were talking about this before, but during COVID, self-care, staff care, and in thinking about, again, a high quality program or even just a great program needs to have educators who are being taken care of and who are taking care of themselves. And so that means finding them opportunities to do that. And I think putting that focus on that group of people, investing in them. So yes, the compensation is part of investing. The professional development is part of investing, ensuring they have opportunities outside of their classrooms to connect with each other, to plan on behalf of children without children present. There are so many ways in which you can elevate the profession and give them the opportunities that they need to be their best selves, to then therefore be the best that they can be for the children that they're working with, and for the families. So I think that that's a really, really big part of it.
I want to also jump in and thank you all in Pittsburgh. And Liza, I've got to say the work that you have done for advocacy and putting your voice out there to make sure that we realize in this country right now and in this continent overall that there are huge things we must do in order to make sure that that idea of compensation equity, or of understanding these block grants that are coming true at every moment, mean that we're looking for a bigger group of people to help us with this as a field going forward. But when Jays like you all and directors like you, Liza, make it your mission to be the face that's there, making sure that you're on the front line, always getting better, aware of how far there is to go, that really changes the landscape. And I put that out there too for a couple of the questions in the chat about how we handle shortages, how we handle salary. I mean, honestly, this is a much bigger problem than any one J has on its own back. And I want you to know that that's something, especially with our Shmakulinu mission, that we are doing as an advocacy branch for early childhood at JCC Association. We're working on that as we speak. And thank you, Pittsburgh, for all you've done to help. I'd love to take a question here from Dave Stanton in Dallas. Go, please, jump right in.
So first, I want to say thank you, not just for sharing, but just for the work you're doing. It makes my heart sing more than a little bit to hear you guys talking about children as citizens and all the work you're doing to elevate the profession. You had mentioned briefly career pathing for your teachers, and I think that that's one of the things that I think is a big struggle in the field, because you can have a few maybe official leadership positions in a school, but there's only so far off in between teacher and then, you know, maybe you have a curriculum person and that assistant director and director. But how have you guys envisioned the career pathing with your staff, and how do you help people sort of move along and grow on the different tracks that you've looked at creating?
So I think I got a little teary there when you said that your heart was singing. Is that what you said? That was really nice. I think that something that's been important to us is to really listen to the teachers around their interests. So not just I want to teach for this number of years and then become an assistant director or director, but I really care about making sure that young children are in classrooms where there is culturally competent teaching happening. And so Kathy mentioned a minute ago about the work that we're doing in Pittsburgh around anti-racism. And that's an example of something that has bubbled up from educators' interests. Specifically last summer, after George Floyd was killed, there were a lot of conversations that were happening. And we began just sort of diving into what was our role in that. And sure enough, other people were having conversations. And I said, wait, these people all need to talk to each other. I'll embarrass Katie Plofker, who I see at the bottom of my screen, said that, you know, we have to do this. And we created a group that we call The Workshop, but that meets every other week or so to think about anti-racism and culturally competent classrooms. And a couple of educators in particular who really are driving that are leaders here. They're impacting everybody. They're impacting every educator and every child and every family, you know, with the work that they're with this initiative. So can they be compensated for it? I don't know. Jason will talk about that later. But there are so many opportunities to grow as leaders, even when you don't have a specific title. I know that's something that I've, you know, learned along my journey at the JCC also, and I'm trying to impart that to our educators. And I think that there are a lot of educators who appreciate that because they don't necessarily want to be in administrative roles. I mean, I know there are administrators who sometimes want to be back in the classroom. So I think that that finding those other opportunities, finding those other, the pockets of interest that people have, and giving them those opportunities, get out of their way and let that happen. I think that's been really important here.
And Liza, I'd say that about every department at the JCC. It's not just an early childhood issue. That has to be the mantra, whether it be within our camp professionals and our children and youth professionals and our fitness professionals, whatever area that is. Our job is to guide and supervise and lead, but also to allow people that freedom and the freedom to challenge. And that's, I see that as a senior leadership challenge. Is what does it mean to provide the room for people to be able to do that, even when it's uncomfortable? And to be really frank, the anti-racism work, which is really special, and we were in that space as an agency. But when you don't know how you're going to turn the lights on, and literally the George Floyd piece came out literally right as you're reopening after a 3-month closure. It was about the last thing I could focus on, and I just wanted to put it off to the side. But the educators couldn't, and the parents couldn't, and this one couldn't, and that one couldn't. And ultimately, we had to figure out a way to do it in a way that was authentic, and to not just react and put out some kind of statement and feel like we've done our job and pat ourselves in the back, but actually get into deeper work, give it the time and afford it, and realize that that was actually part of rebuilding our culture and doing that thoughtfully. And really, with me, just allowing the freedom to have that conversation and to be guided by it. And ultimately, that was the path that we took. So you can't always time all this stuff. We each have to do our piece. And by the way, it's very consistent with the Schreiber lens, is very consistent with a constructivist approach, and you never get there. And for those that have used the Schreiber Center, the Sirett School right down the street from us at Carnegie Mellon is one of the model schools in the country, as is the Boulder School, and all of this. But the bottom line is that they've been in this for 25 years and they're not there. You're always on the journey, and in Reggio Emilia, Italy, they're on the same journey since World War II. So I think you begin to understand it's a little bit like other Jewish precepts, which is you never get to the finish line. You're just always climbing up that mountain, and you're always taking it one step at a time. But you can actually take a look back and say, my God, we've really begun to climb up this mountain when we look down, if we're not afraid of heights.
1,000,000%. And even if we are afraid of heights, so there you go. I think that there are questions coming in that are all around what you did exactly with your the changes that you made, which were incredibly important. But I also know that looking at the clock here, the answer to many of them are that you need to sort of look at your own culture that you're building in your schools. And what I'm hearing you bring to the forefront here for us is this idea that nothing without mission, nothing without defining quality, and nothing without this idea, Liza, of equity for all, and really knowing that that is so true, that whatever we're doing, we might say it one way, but if we suddenly scratch the surface and realize we're not lifting everybody and helping them go forward with truth and even transparency, then we're not doing it yet. So you're right, that reach forward is huge. So I think we will just let each of you maybe have a last word here, just to bring it home, because I think that would just feel so wonderful. I know we'll on my Brady Bunch screen, why don't we go with Brian and then Jason and then Liza, and we can just hear from you, and then we'll bring it home there, please.
I think that for those of you that are in executive roles, either running your schools or on a CEO position or an associate exec position, you can't do change on the surface. We talked about a 50-year employee, and we talked about Jason coming as a chief program officer. We were ready for change, not because of what we did prior. We were ready for that next step. We knew that when you have a long tenured professional, oftentimes change doesn't happen, and it's sort of sitting there for the taking. Jason and Liza have elevated the profession, elevated the quality of our school, and elevated my practice.
I don't know how I follow that. Good luck, Liza. I think number one, start somewhere. Number two, be committed. Number three, have courage despite the fear factor. And number four, don't look back.
I just want everybody to know that before this conversation, Jason told me, he promised that he was going to embarrass me, but you didn't. I'm so proud of you.
Look
The
behind you.
I think I'll add to what Kathy was saying before when you said, nothing without mission, nothing without equity. And I would say almost nothing without collaboration, because I think that, again, it can be, speaking from the early childhood perspective, but even from some of the other work that I did at the JCC, you can feel really isolated at times because you're so focused on what your area, your program area is and your area of expertise. But I try to do almost, nothing without collaboration. And I think being transparent and paying attention to your relationships, those are all such important things on your journey. And I'm grateful to have the team that I have, again, both internally, the senior leadership team, all of the people I've been able to work with at the JCC and JCCA, and appreciate the opportunity very much today. So thanks to all of you for the time.
Thank you indeed.
Mic drops all over the place. I really am blown away. And this collaboration idea, these 21st century skills that have gotten us out of the pandemic, collaboration, communication, creativity, critical thinking, all of them deeply embedded with lenses. I just think it's what happens in the classroom. It's what happens in our world at JCCs. And about collaboration, there's nothing we do at the Schreiber Center without bringing Pittsburgh right in to help us lead the way. So thank you for showing us the system behind the curtain and the relationships and how you hold each other accountable. I really know that Liza, Jason, and Brian are invested in paying this forward and helping others find ways into this brave space. Please get in touch. A more generous and welcoming team you will not find. And I really mean that. And not just because we're being recorded. I actually say that even when I'm not being recorded. But it's really, really true. I have a few ProCon announcements to share before we conclude. As you saw today, our colleagues are our best teachers. So from 4 to 5 Eastern and 1 to 2 Pacific, join us for JCC Excellence Showcase. In each 30-minute session, your colleagues will share JCC initiatives in programming, staff recruiting and retention, visionary management, or marketing and media, just like the one you just experienced, offering a great opportunity to learn about initiatives that can be replicated in your JCC community. Find more information and links to the sessions on SpotMe. A quick reminder that the virtual vendor hall will be open again on Thursday, April 29th from 1:45 to 2:45. That's Eastern. During this time, sponsors will be available for live, engaging, and informative video breakouts. You'll see product demos and have an opportunity to ask questions about how vendors' products and services can best help your JCC. Thank you again to the JCC of Greater Pittsburgh and to all of you for coming. I want you to know one more thing is that J Cafe in Kumo space, where we can all hang out and talk about this amazing session, and all of them will be happening as well later today. I'll be in the fitness room, so a place I don't often go. And I really can't wait to talk to you all more, because the hardest thing about all these sessions is that we turn off the screen and we're not allowed to just come and thank you so profusely in person. I hope you're feeling the love and the appreciation for all of us. Pittsburgh.
Thank you, Kathy and Mackenzie, for what you do to elevate our field as well.
Thank you. Everyone, take good care, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.